Good evening, everyone. A very, very warm welcome to yet another episode of GRE Edge Guest Seminars. All right, I can see that there's a huge list of attendees who've just joined in here and all super, super excited to discuss about our guest here. And of course, why won't you, right? I mean, today's guest is very special and he has a really, really amazing experience of preparing for GRE and his admissions to share because he is a student who has scored a massive 330 in his GRE and bagged some pretty amazing admits, 4 top admits to be precise. And it doesn't end there, guys. He's also gotten a fully funded PhD admit as well. So I'm not going to give away further details. I'm going to leave that to when we get our guest to join us. And it's time for me to call upon the guest today. So a very warm welcome to Shubhanwit Roy. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience, Shubhanwit?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Rana. Hi, guys. I'm Shubhanwit. Hope you all are doing well. So a little about me. As you know that I scored 330 in GRE, and according to me, it's not that big of a deal. So I started out as an undergrad student in electronics and communication engineering from NIT Durgapur in West Bengal. And then I worked for 1 year in business analytics in Mu Sigma in Bangalore. And after that, I came here to Ames, Iowa at Iowa State University to pursue my master's. And after completing it in 1.5 years, I have moved on with my same professor to pursue a PhD in reconfigurable radio frequency engineering, which is a discipline of electrical engineering.
Fantastic. So we're supremely excited to have you here. In fact, we are reconnecting with Shubhanwit after a couple of years ourselves. So very, very happy to have you here, discuss your experience and motivating and inspiring so many students here who are out here to listen to your experience. So thank you so much for joining us today, Shubhanwit. It seems like your audio is not very clear. So can you just speak a little louder so that we can see if the audience can hear you better?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Guys, are you able to hear Shubhanwit clearly? All right, yes, says Aditya, Ayush. All right, seems like they can hear you now. Fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about your GRE score and your verbal quant AWA breakup and a little bit about your profile?
Like I said, I scored 330 overall in my GRE. In quant, I got 169. I still kind of regret missing out on that 1 point. And in verbal, I got 161, which is kind of beyond what I was expecting. And my AWA was not that impressive. I got a 4.0 in that. And so that's all for GRE. And in TOEFL, I took the TOEFL 2, and in that I got 117. And like I said, my undergrad is from NIT Durgapur in electronics and communication engineering, followed by 1 year of working at Mu Sigma in Bangalore, which is a decision sciences company.
Wonderful. So that is quite an impressive profile. So some of our students here want to know about your CGPA. So can you tell us what was your undergrad CGPA, Shubhanwit?
It was 8.88.
Wow, that is pretty amazing. So quite an interesting profile. You've worked for a year. You've also scored a pretty amazing GRE score. So naturally, the audience is brimming with questions here. I can see a lot of questions coming in. Share some tips. Give us knowledge on how to plan preparation and so on. So guys, we will certainly get to that. We have a very, very packed agenda planned for you guys. We'll be talking about Shubhanwit's GRE preparation, timeline, admits, scholarships, and anything that you can ever imagine. So let's start off with what exactly is life like at Iowa? So Shubhanwit is currently joining us live from USA, from Iowa. So he's currently pursuing his master's at Iowa State University. So can you tell us, Shubhanwit, how is life like in the USA at Iowa specifically?
Well, life at Iowa, or in the town that I live in, which is a small town called Ames, in Iowa, it is completely opposite what I had envisioned United States of America to be. Because when I used to think of United States, of course, my view was completely motivated by Hollywood and American TV shows. all I used to think about were cities like New York and San Francisco and Chicago and LA and all those, like with tall buildings and coastlines and stuff like that. Whereas I live in a very small town, which has, I mean, you hardly see people. It's a small town of 70,000 people, out of which around 35,000, that's like half of them are students. And so, yeah, it's kind of pretty boring. Day-to-day life is boring, but work keeps you busy. But other than that, yes, there are certain advantages too, because you can just keep your doors unlocked and doors of your house, your car, and nothing will ever get stolen. So yes, those are also, certain advantageous things, I would say. People are much more professional everywhere you go and talk to them. They're ready to help you. It shows. And but one thing I really dislike is that it gets close to 40 degrees Celsius in the summer and negative 40 degrees in the winter. So that's really bad.
All right, but I think these are a couple of things that you can handle if you're really, passionate about what you study, and I'm sure you are one of them, because you're completed your master's and now you're doing your PhD. What is your academic life like at Iowa? Can you shed some light on that, Shubhamvit?
Sure. I mean, academic life, according to me, is great. It's much more rigorous than what I experienced back at home in India. Um, yes, I mean, here, courses are, like I said, very rigorous and intensive. It, of course, depends from professor to professor, but they do not, as far as coursework goes, they do not stress a lot on examinations, unlike in India. So maybe the exam part of a particular course is something like 20 to 30%, while the rest is all based on weekly homework and project assignments and stuff like that. And so those kind of are really intensive, and you have to work throughout the entire semester, and you cannot, unlike in India, when I would just study on the night before exam and just go for it, that cannot happen. But on the other hand, I think that I have definitely learned much more in every course that I have taken. Well, almost every course I have taken since coming here. So it has been a good experience from that, and enriching experience, if I may add.
That is fabulous. And in fact, I can see a lot of students in the audience saying, wow, that is pretty amazing, and are curious to know more about your GRE preparation timeline and so on. So let's quickly move on to that. Well, before we do that, can you tell us what are the admits that you receive for, so that the audience knows what are the admits you've gotten and the scholarships that you've received from these universities?
Yeah, so I had applied for 3 universities in United States, and I got admits from all 3 of them. And those were, of course, Iowa State University, where I am. And other than that, I had applied and got into Ohio State University and University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And outside the United States, I had got an admit from RWTH Aachen in Germany, as well as I got an interview call from TU Munich in Germany, but I did not pursue it because I had other admits at that point of time.
All right. So USA top admits from some of the amazing schools in the US, and definitely one of the best university in Germany as well. So how did you go about choosing between the two? I mean, why did you end up choosing Iowa amidst all of these admits? Can you tell us what is the thought that went behind this decision?
Well, the most important thing was that I got fully funded from Iowa State University. And from the very first day, I was getting to do research, and I wanted to do research. And so I think I started out, unlike most students, or unlike any student I have known, I think I started out doing my research at Iowa State University even before I started taking a course. So yes, that was my primary motivation. And also, I did not get any funding from Ohio State and UMass Amherst. And as far as RWTH Aachen is concerned, I mean, in Germany, in most universities, I believe, education is free. But then there are certain advantages of being in the United States. The first of which being is that you can converse in English, and coming from India, it's pretty easy for all of us. So these might be the most important reasons for
Most
me to
important
choose.
reason.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So we will be talking more about how to go about shortlisting universities. Shubhanvit has some really interesting details to share on how to go about looking for the right universities for your profile. So stay tuned to that. Let's quickly start off with his GRE preparation. Let's take that in order. We'll first cover his GRE preparation journey and then move on to how he planned his applications process and so on. So let's get started, guys. Do you guys want to get started and find out more about Shubhanvit's GRE preparation journey, guys? Yes, says Dviti. Sumar, excited, says Ayush. Please share some specific tips, says Rishabh. Amit Joshi, Aditya. Yes, says Sriram, Sonia. Fantastic. You can see the audience is just really excited. So let's get started on the GRE preparation details. So can you tell us, when did you start preparing for the GRE, and a little bit about the timeline? How many months did you actually dedicate for your GRE prep and so on and so forth? Can you tell us more about your GRE prep, Shubhanvit?
Sure. So I had taken my GRE in October 2014. I was in my final year of engineering at that point of time. And I thought that it would be a good time to take the GRE because, I mean, later on, I don't know, I would get busy. So that was kind of a time when I did not have a lot, or so I thought. And so I started out 6 months before, I guess, October. I did not have October specifically in mind when I was moving forward. But a friend of mine was preparing for GRE, and I knew that sometime down the line I wanted to take the exam. And I saw him, preparing using GRE, one of the GRE Aegis courses, and I liked the portal and the kind of questions. So I went forward and registered for one course, which was for 6 months. But to be honest with you, I mean, other things happened. I got a job, so I got lazy. And then, I was doing some research as an undergrad student too. And so, that came along, as well as midterm exams, and I got thrown off. So for the first 3 months, I guess I did, you know, maybe the work worth 1 month. I mean, that I should have done. But then my SFAs used to call me, and they used to try to motivate me to work. But for the first 3 months, I didn't do anything. And then I set out a date, I guess 24th of October 2014. And once I did that, and I guess that's how my mind works. Once I had one goal that, okay, I have to get done by, in 3 months, I spoke to my SFAs, and they rescheduled everything. I mean, made it more concentrated because I had something like 5 months material to cover in 3 months. And then I think I diligently just followed it, spending around 1.5 hours every day. And I think that's it. And I took a few exams too, and that's it. And after 3 months, I took the exam.
Wonderful. So effectively, you prepared for about 3 months for your GRE,
That's
right?
correct. That's correct.
All right. Now, he did mention about the SFAs here at GREH. For those of you guys who are not really aware of what exactly an SFA is, they are personal trainers allotted to each of our students when they enroll with GREH. And you have one personal trainer for verbal and one personal trainer for quants. So that was, I just wanted to clarify that for those of you guys who are attending for the very first time. So we have a question here from Shrikant Varshne. He says, I'm looking for admissions for fall of 2019. When is the ideal time to, take my GRE and TOEFL and get done with that? So you, on the other hand, wrote your GRE, of 1 year before you actually apply to universities. But according to you, what do you think would be the ideal timeline, Shubhanvit?
I mean, if you are looking for a fall admission, then I think you should be ready with all your application material by the end of October, because many schools in United States start having their application deadlines in November. So from that standpoint, I would say it's good to take the GRE maybe towards the end of August or in September. Donna, I can't hear you. Can you?
All right.
Now I can.
Am I audible now? Okay.
Yes.
So typically, you would advise students to get done with GRE and TOEFL by end of August or beginning of September?
Yeah, I mean, if someone is coming from a background of studying English in school for, I mean, all their life, then I don't think TOEFL is a challenge at all. It's like like I said, I took my GRE on October 24th, and had no idea about how TOEFL was, and I just got introduced to the exam on October 25th, and I took it on October 26th. And so I think that if someone knows English, it's a way easier exam than GRE, so that can be taken anytime. But I think that yes, because you need to plan a little early for GRE, it's better to plan it out and get done with the exam by say September end. I think that's the ideal thing according to me.
Wonderful. So I guess that gives you a clear timeline on by when you need to get done with your GRE and TOEFL if you are applying for Fall 90. Right. So now we have a couple of questions here coming from students on how to prepare for GRE verbal, how to prepare for GRE quants. Guys, we will discuss that right away. In fact, we wanted to start off with GRE verbal first, right? So many of the aspirants preparing for GRE have their own challenges. Now, guys in the audience, I want to ask you one question. If you have already started preparing for the GRE, what are some of the challenging areas that you have come across? Can you quickly type it in the chat box and let me know, guys? Wow. So RC and vocab says, vocabulary says Meghna, RC and vocab says Amit, RC says Pranay, RC says Avinash, difficult English word says Anusha, verbal RC says Shri Aslesh, verbal says Gautam, probability says Guru Raja. Wow. Okay. So RC says Ojaswita. So I think RC is the clear winner here. So what were some of your challenges, Subhanwit? What were the most challenging aspects of the GRE preparation according to you?
Well, like most other people are mentioning, even I had a tough time with reading comprehensions.
Of course. Yeah. So what exactly did you find challenging about reading comprehension?
So there were different kinds of reading comprehensions that GRE provides, and it can span across any and every subject. So for me, I thought that I was comfortable with reading comprehensions which were kind of objective from a science and engineering background or economics or business. But I really had a tough time, I think mostly because I was not exposed so much to some abstract passages from, some liberal arts subject, say some critical piece on some novel or poetry, or something to do, something on architecture or abstract art, those kinds of things. And especially there were certain questions in GRE, which was kind of, what do you think would the author most likely agree with? Or what is the tone of the author? I would be totally clueless. I mean, in passages from science and engineering, you could not ask such a question. It was pretty, objective. But I really struggled in the first month or so. I mean, of those 3 months in which I rigorously prepared, for the first month or so, I think I really struggled with such passages. I used to score really bad.
So naturally, my follow-up question is, the fact that you ended up, overcoming all of these hurdles and getting a massive 161 in your GRE verbal. That must have, that is a crazy feat to achieve, especially if you found RC or verbal to be so challenging. So can you tell us, based on your experience, what is it that you did to overcome these challenges? And also that would be, beneficial for the audience here who said, RC is a nightmare and so on. I'm sure some of the tips that come from your experience would be really valuable. So can you shed some light on that, Shubhanwit?
Yes, definitely. But before that, I would just like to say that there is no one size fits all. And if someone reads a lot, if someone is exposed to reading a lot, I think they would definitely they would have really advanced comprehension skills, which would help them. But for me, I think I had medium comprehension skills going in. And like I said, I really struggled with abstract pieces of RCs. But then I got a lot of help from my SFAs and a couple of things that I remembered which really helped. The first one was that to not read the questions before reading the entire passage on the whole. And I mean, from my point of view, my personal advice would be it's a strict no-no. Never ever read the questions first, because if you read the questions, your mind gets biased. You do not look at the entire passage with an open mind. You just try to find out the answers, and this is not like, the kind of passages you would get while in high school. I mean, there the questions would be right in the passage, and you could just pick it up and write your answer. Here it does not happen. You need to infer things by reading it. So my first my first pointer would be that don't read the questions, just take your own sweet time, read the entire passage. If you don't understand it, then go and read again. And once you think that you have got a fair amount of idea about what the passage speaks of, then attack the question and take one option at a time and see how it works. I know it's very tempting to jump right to the question, and that is what I did for the first few times, but trust me, in my personal experience, that does not end up well most of the time. Because that in GRE there will be many questions, many options which would be pretty similar and which are pretty close, and to crack the right one, I think it's always a top-down approach is better rather than a bottom-up approach. That is, you completely get an idea of what the passage says, and then you attack one question after the other. I mean, that's the first thing. And one more thing that I would like.
Okay, well, just sorry to interrupt, but
No
just a couple of questions coming in based on what you just mentioned. I mean, I think we've busted a very popular myth. Most of the students tend to think that reading questions before, reading the passage actually helps save time. For example, Uttej Vattipalli says, time is a constraint. So do you think there would be enough time for slow readers? So what do you have to say to that, Shubhanvit?
Okay, I mean, personally, I don't know, for a particular person, how much time they would need to read that passage. But one thing happens, when you practice enough, your speed will, of course, pick up. And there is a kind of, the theme of GRE passages, they kind of seem to repeat. And once you familiarize yourself, and I think most of GRE is mostly about familiarizing yourself rather than knowing exactly what is going to be there. So I think that, and in the long run, if you first attack the entire passage and then move on to the questions, I think, in the end, it helps you save more time. At least that has been my personal experience. So if you think that, any one of you thinks that you are a slow reader, don't worry. Take a lot of practice assignments and tests and try to pick up your speed, and I'm sure you will. And that's a general tip to every examination. Try to have a clear headspace when you are attempting any question under a time constraint, because if you have that in the back of your mind that you're running out of time, then I don't think it can help you in any way. But if you keep on practicing, I'm sure that it's going to help you pick up your pace. But once you have the reason I stress on reading the passage is first is not only that you have an open mind and you can tackle each question in a better way, but also that I think each GRE passage is accompanied by 3 or 4 questions at times. And so if you have a proper understanding of the passage, say you spend a couple of extra minutes reading the entire passage, so what? Once you are done with it, you can answer, and if you understand it properly, you can save a lot of time answering those 4 questions. You can, maybe after reading the passage and understanding it properly, you can get done with all 4 questions in a minute. So I guess at the end of the day, you can also end up saving time if you first read up the entire passage.
Wonderful. I think I absolutely agree with that. Let's not, waste a lot of time going back and forth if you don't really spend a lot of time initially understanding the passage. So I hope that answers your question, the Uttej and Soumya Jyoti, who had questions on, whether it's going to take more time or not. So I hope that pretty much answers your question. So now let's move on to the next tip. You had a couple of more tips to share for reading comprehension, right? So what are some of the other things that students should keep in mind while preparing for reading comprehension?
Yeah, the second thing that I would like to mention is there are at times really intimidating sentences in the GRE. I mean, if you read it at once, it doesn't it doesn't seem to make any sense. And at that point, I think it's a good idea to try to divide the sentence into smaller parts, smaller segments that you understand, and then connecting them together and trying to understand what the entire sentence means or what the author is trying to imply, because that is very important in GRE. Like, all of you guys who have come across questions would know that it's not, the GRE exam is, the reading comprehensions in GRE is not so much about just going and finding answers. It's not so much about the observations you make. Yes, there are passages in science and engineering where it's just reporting observations, but in most of the abstract passages, it has to do with the inferences you are making, or rather, you have to understand the inferences that the author is making. So for that, at times when you get completely thrown off by, a particular sentence, just be cool. And I know it's much easier said than done, but just again, keep a clear head and try to break it down into smaller segments, and then, try to understand the meaning of it, and then move on to the next sentence. Just don't jump ahead of yourself. That's my second advice. Donna, I can't hear you again.
Is my audio okay
Yes,
right
it is.
now? So yeah. As I was saying, I can see a lot of questions coming in here, not just related to GRE verbal or RCs, but typical questions basically related to admissions and getting into some of the top universities. So guys, I would request you to don't be disheartened if I don't take up these questions right now, because we have an exclusive Q&A session towards the end of the seminar. Once we are done covering all of the major points as part of the seminar agenda, we will certainly take up specific questions that you have as part of the Q&A, right? So Shubhamit will certainly spare some time for Q&A, so you can certainly send across these questions during the Q&A session. I hope that's okay. Right now, I won't be picking up questions immediately, so don't feel bad about that. I'll certainly try to cover all of your questions in the Q&A session. All right, so I hope that's okay with you guys. Yes, says Kritika. Yes, says Tanmay. Sirisha, Saurabh. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. So don't worry if I don't pick up these questions directly. So let's move on to the next tip that Shubhanwit has to share for reading comprehension.
Yeah, so I think so as far as reading comprehensions are concerned, I think that these the first two, like I said, were to not read the questions. Jump ahead of yourself and read the questions. And the second one was to, dividing and conquering the complex sentences. And yes, if you are registered for a GRE Edge course, then take into account the kind of feedback that your SFA is providing, because he or she will be an experienced person. They know the exam much better than you do, and those come in handy. I think this kind of reiterates back to step one. My first and second point is because those were things I learned from my SFA, and so that's all. Read that feedback. Just because say you take a particular test and get, say, 60% of the answers correct. Now, just don't jump to the next, test and, try to see that how well you do. So the other four, where you went wrong, what kind of, that will actually help you. So like I'm saying, I kind of figured out that I was not doing really well with such abstract passages. So I got a narrow, a pretty focused space where I had to work on. Maybe for one of you guys it's different. Maybe one of you guys do it really well with such abstract liberal arts passages, but maybe your skill set is such that you are not performing well enough in seemingly objective things from math or engineering. So in that case, understand that, because only you can judge yourself and understand yourself properly, and talk to your SFA about that. See what he or she has to say about that, and work on it accordingly.
All right, I think that is absolutely, You're absolutely right about the fact that paying attention to your own specific problems and tackling them, individually is very, very necessary. And that's where the SFA or your personal trainers really do step in and help you in your own unique ways. So on that note, in fact, I'd like to ask you guys, how many of you guys, are looking to conquer your own weaknesses just like Shubhanvit did? How many of you guys are looking to conquer your own specific weaknesses? Me says Praveen, me says Ojaswati, wow, me says Ipsita, Anusha, Tanmay. I am really looking to do that, says Rishabh. I want to do that. Obviously, all of us, says Kritika. Wonderful. So I can see a lot of you guys are looking to conquer your difficulties, and this is the first major step when it comes to cracking a massive GRE score like 330. Just like what Shubhanvit has scored. How many of you guys find GRE vocabulary to be a nightmare? Can you let me know by typing in me in the chat box and let me know? Oh my. So quite a lot of you, in fact, bigger than a nightmare, says Rishikesh. Me says Nikhil, Achal, Sharath, Raghav, Devashri, Soumitra. Oh my God. So I can understand your dilemma. So did Shubhanvit. So Shubhanvit, can you share some tips on how students can actually master GRE vocabulary? What is it that helped you in your GRE preparation?
Um, well, again, I cannot speak for everybody, but the thing that helped me, I guess, score well in those kinds of questions, I guess text completion and sentence equivalence, was not ever trying to master GRE vocabulary. I mean, I know again different approaches work for different people, and I think I got a little lucky because I have a knack for knowing new words, and so I never, unlike many people who decide on, they want to do X number of words on a single day, and then they move to the next day with a new set of words. I never tried something like that. I would just have my phone or laptop and GRE Edge's that word list app. I think it's called WordBot. And I would just, whenever I got free time, I would just swipe through the entire thing, and I would just keep on, going through words, browsing through words. And I think that helped me. I never tried to learn the meaning of any word. It is just that I made myself familiar with words. And like I'm saying, it made things easy for me because I found it to be fun. And yes, at the end of the day, when I took my GRE exam, I did not know the meanings of most of the words there, but I can tell you there was not a single word in the entire GRE I took which I had not come across before. So I kind of had a feel of, what the word was, or some sort of an image in my head, which was placed, there by the WordBot app, which always has an image, accompanying a particular word. And I think I learned well visually, and I think that helped me.
Take an example of learning words visually. Can you share one example of any word that you remember right now? I mean, it's been a while, I know, but is there any word that you remember, at least you recollect the picture, and that's helped you to remember the meaning?
Yeah, so one word I can think of is transgression. And it has to, it again, I do not exactly remember what it means, but it has to do something with breaking a law. And the reason I remember it is there was a pretty cool image with that word on the app. And that was around the time in 2014 when, oh, I can see that now. So in 2014 when memes were, just becoming famous, and like you can see that there is this image of this bird sitting on the sign, and it's written transgress like a boss. And I kind of found it cool, and that image stuck to me. I mean, yes, I think that transgression is not a very uncommon word. I mean, not one of the most uncommon words you would think of about GRE, but I think that this is the thing. Even today, if someone uses the word transgress, that's the first image that comes to my mind. And I think there are a lot more. I mean, if I think of it, there would be a lot more of such other words too.
Right. I actually agree with the fact that, the visual aids actually builds an association. Just like you could recall the meaning, even if you didn't clearly remember the meaning, you could kind of associate the picture and kind of conclude what it would roughly mean. So I guess that's where visual word learning, plays an important role. So for those of you guys who want to learn a quick new word, here's what transgression actually means. Can you guys see it on your screen right now? Yeah, so the definition is a violation of a law or solemn understanding. And a sample use case for it would be, for fear of transgressing the tenets of their faith, many accept all its torments and injustices. Here's just a small sample sentence where you could use the word transgression. So anyway, thank you so much for that tip in terms of vocab building. So is there anything else that you'd suggest to students, on how to improve their vocab building?
Again, like I said, maybe for someone it works better to just go through, memorize words. But I personally feel that the GRE examination is not about that. If it were so, they would just ask you, like in the old GRE, to write synonyms and antonyms of words. And that would be a much more difficult task than what we have in our hand now. So from what we are, the kind of questions that we have to come across, and like I said, those two: text completion and sentence equivalence. There, you don't necessarily need to know what a word means. All you need to know, and this is something I get now from why GRE, even for an engineering student, why GRE would be a required test for getting into an engineering school, because that's what you do. I mean, once you come, the course materials you get or the research papers you read, it's not that you always need to understand the meaning of every single word out there, but you kind of need to have a feel for it, and I think that helps. And yes, maybe you might see that what I'm talking over here is kind of contradicting what I was telling when I was talking about RCs, about how it's important to understand each and every sentence. But I think that's the point of the exams. You need a little bit of both the skills. And again, personally, this may work differently for someone else, but personally for me, this approach worked better. While taking RCs, being very focused on understanding what the RC means. I mean, to the best of my understanding, knowing it and then going forward with the questions. Whereas with GRE words, rather than memorizing every single word out there, and there are only so many words you can memorize. I think they can ask you from anywhere and everywhere. So say you have learned, say, 500 words, and what do you do if you get to 501st word? So other than that, I think rather than that, I think it's better, in my personal opinion, better approach to just get familiarize yourself with thousands of words, and you don't really need to learn anything, but you have a brain, and a human brain is really powerful, so you retain those things. And I mean, if you have done your job right, you can always reproduce them in the exam. And I think that was a very good feeling, when I got questions in the main exam and there was not a single word which I had not come across before. I was familiar. And so that's what I mean. If anyone of you wanted advice from me on this, I would say that just take it easy and try to familiarize yourself. I found it to be fun. And if you don't find it to be fun, then I don't know, maybe this will work, or maybe you can just, go and read up the most important words. But that has been my approach.
Fantastic. So with that, let's move on to quants. It seems like everybody is more curious to find out, how is it that you got that 169 in your quants? But first, can you tell me, do you regret missing out on that 1 point, Shubhanvit?
Yeah, I think if I
So
have
close
any
yet
regret
so far
about,
away.
yeah, if I have any, a modicum of a regret about my GRE score. Okay, I used the word modicum, which I learned during my GRE preparation. I just realized. But if I have any, anything which I do not like a little about my GRE score, that's my quant. Again, not that it matters. I mean, even if I got 165, it would not really make much of a difference. However, I think that yes, I mean, being an engineer, being from a math and science background, I don't know what went wrong. I think I did, maybe there was a very easy question and I just missed out on it. And, maybe you guys know that GRE does not grade on a linear scale. That is, not every question has equal weight. I mean, if it's an easy question and if you score on it, you don't gain a lot. But if you miss out on it, you lose a lot. Whereas if it's a tough question, if you miss out on it, you don't lose a lot. Whereas, getting it right, you can, go pretty much far. So I think from that point, maybe I made one careless mistake and or a couple of them, and that led to this. But like I say, it's not at all a big deal.
All right. So, what are some of the key preparation tips that you'd like to share with the audience here? Because clearly they're all really excited and enthralled by this massive score. So, what is it that you'd like to share from your experience? What are the things that they have to do in order to get a score like you did?
Right. So again, I can only talk from the point of view of a person who has taken the course. I mean, who has a background in math, science, or engineering, because I mean, for us and even for the rest of you guys, there is nothing that you don't know because everyone has had math in their class 10 board exams, and there is hardly anything that is asked in the exam which is beyond that. So it is pretty easy. And the fact that it is so easy can lead to your undoing. That is, if you get ahead of yourself and overconfident. Because the way GRE asks the questions, I mean, it tests on those simple concepts that you knew when you were a 14 or a 15-year-old kid. However, the way way GRE asks questions, you need to be familiar with that. Otherwise, you can, find yourself in a mess. I mean, if, for people who watch cricket, it's like, I would just give an analogy. It's like, think of you as being India and you're playing a match against Bangladesh or Afghanistan. You can do your own undoing. No one else can stop you. I mean, if you are not overconfident and if you, just you are in the right headspace and, if you practice, then I think it should not be a big deal.
I think you're absolutely right about the fact that students do tend to get a little overconfident, thinking, hey, cons is slightly easier. Let me spend a little extra time on verbal. But I guess whatever you spoke about, keeping your cool would definitely help overcome that. So we have a question here from the audience. So, oh wow, there are a lot of questions coming in here. Very easy to miss out on questions. Guys, I can see that you are, you have a lot of questions to ask Shubham with, and I personally want to take all of them up, but don't be disheartened if I don't take them up immediately. I will certainly do take them up in the exclusive Q&A session, if not right now, right? So let me quickly take up a couple of questions here. So I had a question here. I forgot the name. Oh yeah, Rishabh Gupta. He says, please share how to avoid those silly mistakes which keeps us away from a 170. Right. So I guess, can you share a little bit from your experience? What are some of the little things that you can do to ensure you don't make silly mistakes?
Well, firstly, I don't think I'm the right person to ask this question because I think I myself, tanked at one point in the exam because of a silly mistake. However, I would say that respect the examination, respect the fact that, you have to, yes, everything, but respect the fact that you are, writing an examination and take one question at a time. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't be overconfident that, this is simple. This is even a, 9th standard kid can do it. I'm better than this. Why am I wasting my time doing this? Don't have all those thoughts. It's your job. You have decided to take the GRE. So you have your work cut out, and if you want to score 170 or even something close to it, And like I'm saying, it does not matter if it's 100, even 165. 165 for your application purposes is as good as 170 in my personal opinion. Now it might depend on your, you might personally, being a student from that background, might not want to lose out on that. But for that, just, I mean, you know, have, be clear. I mean, don't be overconfident. And this is completely the opposite thing of what, I was talking about for the verbal preparations. And I think that happens with most of us. The reason people tend to score below par, below expectations in verbal is because they are tense about the kind of questions, and um, they're not confident at all. Whereas in the quant section, overconfidence is what does the undoing for most of us. So yeah, I mean, the only way is, I mean, you don't have to spend a hell lot of time on it because you know the stuff. But go out there and take a test, practice under time constraints, and then, again, if you are on a GRE Edge course, and if you see that, you are making out, you're making some silly mistakes, then even silly mistakes have a pattern. Try to talk to your SFA, get to know what their feedback is, and work on that. And again, the most important thing for I think for any exam in the world is just to, be calm and cool, and respect the exam and take it professionally. You are a professional, and if you do all these things, I'm sure any of you would do great.
I'm just a little curious here, Shubhanwit. What were some of the areas where you kept making mistakes and your SFA kept pointing that out? Were there any specific topics like that in quants?
Well, I cannot seem to recall anything in specific at this point of time, but I think there were a couple of things like which is seemingly very easy. Things like, I think there were questions on compound interest. Okay, and the thing is that for some time, I was all like, I know math, and compound interest was something I think I did not deal with since high school. And I thought, okay, what can it be? It's just, something, I didn't even look at formula because, if you are someone who spends a lot of time doing math, you would hate formulas because, I mean, that's not the way to do math. But then I got ahead of myself, and I kept making some recurring mistakes on that. And because, I was doing something wrong. I mean, I knew the concepts, but I was not spending enough time thinking through my concept. And that's why I kept making a couple of mistakes here and there. And then my SFA spoke to me, and she told me to, calm down, and, and just like what I said a couple of minutes ago, take one question at a time and not jump ahead of me. And I think that's mostly it, and that helped me.
Wonderful. I have Abraham to saying, cool, I did the same. So I guess there are some students here who have enrolled with GRE and they kind of agree with what you say about, going very patiently and listening to the feedback given by SFA. So I believe that kind of does make a difference to how you practice and overcome those silly mistakes over time. So for those of you guys who are looking to overcome your challenges, can you tell me how many of you guys are looking to improve your weaker areas or looking to get personalized feedback on what it is that you have to do to improve and get a better score? Me says Somnath, me says Sanat, Prachi, me says Tanmay, Rohan, Gururaj, Arshita, Rashi, Sonia, Akansha, Khushi, Dviti, Sai Pavan. Well, wonderful guys. I believe that all of you are looking to understand what is it that, where is it that you are making your mistakes and get personalized attention to overcome those mistakes. So to provide an opportunity to do so, I would love to put you in touch with our student counselors so that you understand and understand what is it that you are lacking, where is it that you're lacking behind, and you can take the necessary steps required to overcome those difficulties, right? So if you'd like to do that, if you'd like to get that score, get a perfect 170 and avoid those silly mistakes and get personalized feedback, just type in GRE in capital letters us and let me know, and I will share a link with you all so that you can make use of this link in order to schedule a call with one of our student counselors, and they will help you decide how to take your GRE preparation forward. Right, so I can see Rohan, Tanmay, Ruchika, Nemish, Shruti, Akanksha. Wow, a lot of you guys have just typed in here. So let me quickly paste the link and send it to you all. Here's the link that you can make use of. You can copy paste this link onto your favorite browser, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, or Internet Explorer, and type in your name, your email ID, and your contact number, and you will receive a call from one of our student counselors. Right, so you can discuss with them in detail and get personal guidance on how to take your GRE preparation forward. Right, so I believe that was for those of you guys who were requesting on how to, plan your GRE preparation and take it forward. So with that, we come to the end of discussing Shubhanwit's GRE preparation experience. Harshit, just give me a second. I'm sharing the link with you right now. Yeah. So I hope that clarifies your GRE preparation, queries that you had from Shubhanwit himself. So before we jump over to the admissions part, before we get to know more about the scholarships and the shortlisting of universities and SOP, can you just share your experience preparing with GRE Edge and the Learning Tracker and your SFAs and so on? Can you just quickly summarize how did you find your overall experience with us?
I think it was great. The fact that I ended up with a 330, I mean, when I started out, I think I would be happy with anything above 320 because that is kind of like the benchmark score that most people around are trying to, achieve. And I thought of, GRE verbal as intimidating. And I thought that, going in with, a very, overconfident part of me which thought that could score 170 in quant on any given day, and and also a very nervous part of me which thought that it was a uphill challenge to even score 150 in quant. I thought that yes, that's how I can make a 320 happen. But the fact that I got 330, I think GRE Edge had a huge role to play in that. Both my SFAs were really good. I mean, maybe, like I said, I was overconfident. I wanted 170. But if my quant SFA did not keep me on track about, like I said, like to take one question at a time and, respecting the exam, things like this, maybe I would have ended up with, 5 points less. And whereas in quant, I think, I was struggling a lot, like I said, with reading comprehensions. And yes, I would totally credit GRE Edge for helping me out with that. And also words from GRE Edge's WordBot with all those amazing images. And I think, so, I mean, it had a lot to do with me getting 330, which was way beyond my expectation. Even when, I was in the middle of my preparations, like one month before the exam, I was at a slightly better space, and I thought I would be targeting 325, but I never thought that I would be getting a 330. Again, I should say that it doesn't matter from an admissions point of view, according to me, if you get a 325 or a 330, or even a 335 for that matter. But personally, 330 is a score that feels good. So yeah, so thanks a lot to GRE Edge for that.
We're really, really happy that, we've gotten this opportunity to even get back in touch with you and hold the seminar. I mean, all of these guest seminars are wonderful opportunities that, inspire and motivate several other GRE aspirants out here. I mean, look at this seminar. There are several students here looking to get started with their preparation, and they're all motivated and pumped up simply because of your experience. So thank you so much for joining us here in today's seminar. So let's now move on to discussing more about Shubhanwit's admissions experience. He's got a lot of things to share, and the first thing that we definitely have to cover is the scholarships. Now, Shubhanwit, I think it would be better if you elaborate on the kind of funding that you have received, because I personally, I'm still not over it yet. I'm still super duper excited ever since we first got in touch with. So can you tell the audience the scholarship that you have received?
Yes, of course. So I received um, from the very start of my, master's, and that is why I chose to come to Iowa State University. I received a half-time research assistantship for my entire duration of my master's. And what that means is by the F1 visa, that is the student visa in United States of America,
Mm-hmm.
we can work only half time. Not we cannot be a full-time employee unless we are on an internship. So that's all. So half time over here means 20 hours. And once you are a half time RA or a TA, so RA stands for research assistantship and TA stands for teaching assistantship. If you have one of these, then it comes with a lot of perks. The first thing is that you are no longer assessed the huge amount of international tuition, but you are considered as an in-state student. So that has its own advantages because the in-state tuition is something like half of what the international tuition is. And following that, you also get a 50% scholarship on that amount. So it becomes so for my university, the international tuition fee when I was applying was something like $12,000 a semester, whereas I had to pay $3,000 a semester. So 6,000 is kind of like the in-state tuition fee, and I got a 50% waiver on that too. So it came to 3,000. Other than that, for the first year, I was getting a stipend of $1,900 every month. And that was not only good enough to pay off my $3,000 of worth of tuition fees, but it was also, good enough to take care of all my living expenses. And also I ended up saving a few. And the good thing is at our university, and I guess in across all universities, your tuition, I mean, your stipend that increases by not a very large amount, but by something like it for us, it's $100 every year. So yeah, that's good. And one more thing is, I mean, I am talking for my university, like $1,900 a month is pretty good in Iowa, but in a place like California, I mean, it would be nothing. You would need something like 4,000 at least to survive. Your rent itself would be, north of 2,000 bucks. So in a place like that, you don't need to worry because, mostly even, I mean, you get higher stipends in such universities. Yeah, so that's how I think that's the amount of funding I got. But once I moved from master's to PhD, and this is something true in most public universities that are, I mean, the state-owned universities, that you get a 50% tuition waiver if you have a, half-time RA, that's a 20-hour RA or a TA, or you can have like 10 hours of TA plus 10 hours of RA or whatever the combination is. If you have like 20 hours of assistantship, you get a 50% waiver when you are a master student. And whereas if you have a 10-hour assistantship, you get a 25% waiver as a master student. As opposed to if you are a PhD student, if you have a 20-hour RA, you get 100% off. So now basically I don't have to pay any tuition fees. And if you have a 10-hour TA or RA, then you get 50% off. So it's basically, you'd save, I mean, double on tuition fees than what you do as a master's student.
I believe that kind of, is immense or amazing funding that you have received. And, a lot of students have, asked, what is it that you've done in order to get this kind of funding? For example, I have a question here from Ritika. What are the things I have to keep in mind to get myself an RA? So I'm sure a lot of other students who are looking to get any kind of funding opportunities, being international applicants, most of them are looking for some or the other kind of funding, right? So according to you, what are some of the things that are essential that, if you want to get yourself funded?
So firstly, it's much easier to be funded if you plan on doing research. Because I mean, how the funding works is there are two kinds of, like I said, two kinds of assistantships, and this is true across most universities in the United States. There are research assistantships and teaching assistantships. Now, research assistantships are things which are these are given out by professors, whereas the teaching assistantships are given out by the department. Now, in theory, anyone can get a teaching assistantship who is whoever, and the best person for that course should be getting a teaching assistantship. But since there is always a professor who's at the helm of the course, whoever is instructing the course, I mean, he or she will have their own preference, and they tend to go with their own student, and it helps them too, because that means if I am a professor, and if I have a student, and I can make sure that he gets a TA, then I would not have to pay him his stipend. So I save on my own funds. So yes, I mean, in theory, I mean, it's possible, but practically, I do not know if someone who does not want to do research can get funded through either of these. Now, yes, there are other things also you can do in the campus to earn money, but those are not going to give you a tuition waiver. And coming to, and talking about RA, I mean, if you want a career in research, like I have wanted, it's a fantastic thing, getting an RA, because, everything is taken care of, and you get other benefits also, like, that, you know, healthcare is a huge problem in United States, but being a research assistant or a teaching assistant, you are considered as an employee of the university, so you get, health insurance benefits and, a few other perks. But anyway, getting back to how to secure, a research assistantship, what many people do, which I did not, was to mail professors, beforehand. And for that, you need to kind of, go and analyze the profiles of different professors on the university website and see what, who you want to work with. And even before that, for anyone, and this is something that paid off, I think that there are 4 or 5 components to an application, and those would be your undergrad GPA, your SOP, your letter of recommendation, your GRE score, and your experience. Now, experience can either be a research experience, or you can also have work experience in an industry. So if you are someone who does not have a lot of work experience, like I had just for 1 year, and that was also not in a very relevant field. But anyway, some work experience always helps. But if you are mostly, a student who plans to go, for their master's or PhD right away, or someone with just 1 year or less than that, worth of work experience, like I did, then it is always a good thing to have a lot of, research under your belt, because professors like that, there are a very few people who actually are self-motivated enough to do research at an undergrad level. So once you do that, even if the quality of research that you're doing is not very high, and that you will get to know, I mean, if you read a few papers, you will see that in India, except for a couple of places like maybe IIT Bombay and IISc Bangalore, I mean, the amount, at least in my field, the kind of research that happens is way below standard of, compared to what happens at American universities. But don't get, bogged down by that. If you have, a research experience, and if you have things to, vouch for that, for example, publications always help, because, whoever you're applying to is not going to go to, go and look at the details of the work that you have done. And the only way to know that if you are credible or not is if you have got, publications in a good journal or a conference. And for that, I should also say that if, you are from the background of electrical engineering or computer engineering, you would see that there are a lot of new and upcoming conferences of which are IEEE conferences in India. And I think that it would be the same for other, departments too. But this is just a point of advice. Don't go through that. They're highly plagiarized, and there is nothing worse than plagiarism in United States. That's a big academic crime. So don't go for those, but try to, if you can, try to publish in some international conference or a journal, and that really helps. I had 2 international journal publications, which again, like compared, now I understand that they're not really that great, but the fact that I had in, medium reputed journals, I mean, one pretty much reputed in my field and one kind of medium, reputed journal, that helped, because, professors get a lot of applications. And my professor, my master's advisor, I asked her later on because, like I said, I had not mailed anyone. She had sent out an email to me. I had just applied on Iowa State's portal, and she had sent an email to me that, I mean, if I was interested or not. And I got to know it later on from her. It's just because, I had those two publications compared to other students who did not. So I think the most important thing is having publications, and the only thing that can be comparable in importance would be if you have relevant work experience. Say you want to work in a particular field, you want to pursue a master's in machine learning, and you're working in a company for 3 or 4 years in that. So that is maybe, that might even count, over research experience of someone who has published a couple of papers and is just just an undergrad, just coming out of their undergrad. So yeah, and I think that is the most important thing. In my personal experience, the GRE score is not that big of a deal when it comes to getting a scholarship. It is very important for you to get into a university. Like I said, 320 should do the job. But if you get a 320 or 25, 30 or 35, or even a perfect 340, it's not going to make, a hell lot of a hell lot of a difference between getting funded or not. Yeah, and apart from this, and I would also say that the other things, if you have a good GPA, that always helps. And also, if you have, anything good like letter of recommendation and SOP, of course, they will help too. And one important thing is that if you have a little less of any one of these, say you have a 315 in GRE, don't get, bogged down. You can always make up for that. I know people who had, less than 7-pointer in their GPA, and with a decent enough 320 plus GRE score and a good enough SOP and work experience, doing pretty well. So I think it's not that there is one factor that determines everything. You can most certainly make up with other factors if you have a little less of something. But in my personal opinion, the most important factor is some sort of experience with the field you're dealing with, and that comes either through research or by relevant industry experience.
I think that is wonderfully covered. I think you've pretty much shared everything that has, significance when it comes to securing a scholarship. It is definitely not a very, exact formula that's available, to get a scholarship. But there are a lot of other things. There are a lot of details that you have to pay attention to, especially if you're looking for funding. So thank you so much for shedding light on all of these different factors, especially the one about not having a good enough GPA. You can compensate for that by getting a good enough GRE score, writing a really compelling SOP, and supporting that with good experience. So that kind of brings me to my next point. Do you have any specific tips on how to go about writing that perfect statement of purpose?
Again, this is a tip that I got from a friend of mine, and about how to write an SOP, and I think that is the most effective thing. You have to keep it really, really personal. Now, when you're applying for your GRE, I mean, look at the other things. Your research experiences and your work experience is kind of fixed. You cannot do anything with that. Letters of recommendation, your GPA, your GRE score, everything is fixed. So this is where you can make up for everything, or, I mean, it can even break you. I mean, it's a make or break scenario. And the best thing is to keep it very personal. Yes, you need to be organized. I mean, just don't spiral off, into a completely different direction. You have to stay on point, but you have to basically write your heart out. You would be getting, I think it varies from university to university, but the SOP word limit is something like either 500 word SOPs or 1000 word SOPs. And I think 500 word SOPs are a little more challenging. Because you don't get so much of to write about, but make it personal. I mean, write why you want to do that particular course. And there are two things, I mean, which are very important. Firstly, you have to show it to the university or the review committee of the university that why you are a fit to their scheme of things. Why should they at all be accepting your application? I mean, they would be only accepting your application if you are going to be useful in some way. Either, you would do some great research, or, even if you're not planning on doing research, you would go out and become, to become a distinguished alumnus of, and, give back to the university in some way. So they need something from you. They need something special. Firstly, that. And secondly, it's also very important to show that not only are you are fit for that program, but the program is also fit for you, that you are making an informed decision, and whatever you do aligns with your life goals. Say, you want to, have a career in research, you want to be a professor, but and in that, if you say that you want to be a professor, now there will be thousands of people who actually don't want to be a professor, but, listening to other people or reading, other SOPs would just say it. But I would say that that's not a good thing to do. I mean, if you only want to do something, write it. Like I said, make it very personal. It's your statement. You are showing your purpose over there. It's nobody else's. Nobody else can. Of course, you can get feedback from other people about what they say about the structuring or the language. Don't make grammatical errors. I mean, stuff like that. But as far as the content goes, make it very, very personal. And, like, getting back to the example, I'm saying that if you say, just for the lack of a better example, want to be a professor, really, then put it there, but just don't put that, I have all these goals aligned with my, dream of being a professor at an esteemed US university or whatever. I mean, go through and, experiences that, what made you think that you want to be a professor. And the good thing is you already know it. Otherwise, that's why you want to be so. And if you do not want to be, you are not sure what you want to do in life, which even I wasn't sure. And that's why I started off with my master's and not a PhD. But I knew that I wanted to do some research and gain some research experience. So I showed them. From my childhood, I spoke about experiences that I had, which, kind of made me inquisitive and curious, and, how that built on to making informed decisions, and how one decision affected the other, and how, every decision in my life has, brought me to this place. And henceforth, how I see this program adding to, the scheme of things and helping me achieve whatever goals I want to achieve. So yeah, the bottom line is keep it. It's a personal story, your personal journey. So don't, let anyone else write it. Don't just, copy it from, a template, because it needs to be personal. It is your own statement of purpose.
I think you've kind of pretty much covered all of the essential things to keep in mind while writing a statement of purpose. Every single point about keeping it personal and sharing your relevant objective of actually going to the university is very, very important. And I can see the audience already getting super excited. Like Rishabh says, wow, that was wonderful, says Priyasmita. So that's absolutely fantastic. All of the pointers mentioned were really crucial in SOP writing. And we here at GRH actually do believe that if you are crafting your statement of purpose, then essentially it should answer 4 questions. Just as you mentioned, the first thing, why is it that you're applying to this particular university? Why are you applying for this particular program? Third question would be, what are your short-term and long-term goals, and how would you, achieve these goals by, pursuing a master's abroad? And lastly, why should the university choose you? So if you're able to convince the university on all these aspects, then you've pretty much written a wonderful SOP. So wonderful, says Mohita. Excellent, says Guru Raja. Good to hear, says Shrestha. It's wonderful, says Tanmay. Feeling motivated, says Ayush. I'm really happy to see the audience responding in such a positive manner. All right, so Aditya Shedge has a question. He says, I have a bad academic score with two backlogs, I believe, and a 53% result. But I walked away with the highest package in the college, and I have 5 years of quality work experience. So what are my chances of getting into a top 10 university? So Shubhanwit, from your experience of applying to universities and understanding what is it that universities look for in your profile, what do you have to suggest to Aditya?
Yeah, well, I think that, firstly, congratulations on getting the highest package from your university. Now, the thing is, it depends on the kind of, a place you're working. If it is, which I would be guessing is world famous, and you have done some good work there for the past 5 years, you have your managers or other people to vouch for that, and you get letters of recommendation from them, then why not? I mean, you can definitely, I think, crack a top. It does not matter. Like I said, one thing does not matter. Even if you have backlogs, but then you can show other people that you have what it takes to undergo one of the undergo a program. Then I mean, it does not matter. I mean, if you're really good and if you can show it to them that they're good, that you're good, then you can definitely crack into, I mean, any university you want. Now, as far as scholarships or funding is concerned, that I am not 100% sure about, because if you think of a top 10 university, there will be a lot of people who would have, I mean, nearly perfect, I mean, everything. I mean, all of those 5, 6 criteria that I spoke about, they would be at top of everything. So maybe getting funded might be a little bit of an issue in a top university, but I think you can definitely get into one of them.
I hope that answers your question, Aditya. So I have another question here. How do I offset my backlogs? Asks Vishal Ganti.
That's a good question, Vishal. The first thing, I mean, if you are looking to do research, then get as much as research experience that you can under your belt. That can work like magic for you. And yes, I know people with backlogs who have come, abroad for masters or even their PhDs, because it does not matter how good you are at writing examinations after a point of view, because that's what, and I think we all can agree that there is a huge flaw in the Indian academic system. I mean, it's so damn exam intensive, and exams are not for everyone. They cannot test all the skills that you have. So yes, it's not just, and that is why unlike when you entered, I mean, when you started out your undergrad, it was just all based on one exam. I mean, like JEE or something. But now when you're applying for a master's or a PhD, it's not just one thing. There are a lot of other criteria. It's like you're optimizing multiple variables, and you do not necessarily have to have a very good of one. You can definitely make up for the other things. So yes, if you're looking for research, go and grab some good research experience. Try to publish in a couple of journals. Show it, just write your heart out in your SOP and show it to the admission committee that you're motivated and you are not a good exam taker. So what? You're a great researcher, and that would be the first thing if you are looking for research. But if you're not looking for research, then I think the most important thing would be your work experience. And if you, like I answered in the previous question, if you have good enough work experience, in a well-reputed company across the world, and you have again people to vouch for that, then of course that can do wonders for you. And everything that you do, I mean, write it in your SOP, and that can help. And also one thing that comes to my mind is that if you do not have a good GPA, or if you have backlogs, and if you have a good GRE score, that can also show the admission committee that yes, maybe there was once upon a time you were not so good, but you have definitely cleaned up your act, and I mean, you are better now at performing in a test like scenario too. So I keep on reiterating that it's not one factor that goes in, it's a mix of everything, and it's a function of all of these variables, and the end product is you have to optimize this entire function and not just any one of them.
Wonderfully put. In fact, I think backlogs is an important concern that a lot of students have. I mean, they're in fact intimidated by the fact that, what if they get a reject because of that, and they don't really know how to actually cover up for certain glitches in their profile. So I believe your response has certainly motivated those students having that concern to just move past those hurdles and take that step anyway. So thank you so much for that advice, Shubhanvit. What is your take on profile profile building. What is it that students have to keep in mind in terms of building their profile? Because that's very important when it comes to getting a top university admit, right? So what is your take on building your profile, Shubhanvit?
So there are multiple aspects to this, according to me. But firstly, I would say that yes, I mean, if you have a backlog, then that's not the end of the world. Like I said, you can work towards it. But if you're looking to build your profile, see that if you have a good GPA, because a good GPA can really work well if you are the topper of your department, or I mean, or even if you have a pretty good score, that helps you a lot. Again, that can make up for something else, say a relatively poor GRE score, or having not enough work or research experience. Those things can make up, because again, that is another factor that shows you, I mean, that you're motivated. Now the thing is, like I said, all 5 or 6 criteria that I spoke about, if you have all of those under your belt, I mean, then you can, in theory, go to any university you want, and you might as well even get funded. So I think that if you are looking to do something in research, if you are looking for pursuing thesis-based masters or a PhD, then start early, maybe the sophomore or the second year of your in a 4-year course, or even maybe if you have a 3-year course, even in that might be the ideal time to start out, and with some research experience. So talk to a professor in your field and do some sort of research, and try to publish in, at least have a couple of good journal or good international conference publications under your belt. And like I said, maintain a good GPA, and also try to make contacts. I mean, if you are attending conferences, or even because you're reading papers, you can always start a dialogue with the authors of those papers, and through those things you can have, firstly, you can have more people to vouch for the fact that you are working, and secondly, you can also build contacts with professors who might get impressed by what you are doing as, say, an 18-year-old, while most people start their research when they're maybe 23, 24, and they may themselves see you as motivated and might invite you over. So there is always that chance. And again, I mean, if you have a good work experience in that field, I mean, if you have 3 or 4 years of work experience from one of the top companies of that field, even that helps. So I keep on repeating myself that it's a mix of a lot of factors, but it's always the best thing to achieve is if you have a good score on all of those factors.
Wonderfully put. As usual, Shubhanvit, you've seemed to kind of motivated the audience, and they're all really excited, and I hope this gives you an idea on how to actually focus on building your profile and what are the other aspects involved. For example, you've shared your own research experience and how that played an important role. So if you feel like you're lagging behind in any of these aspects that Shubhanvit just covered, then probably you should get started on that. That's probably one of the most important things that you have to work on if you're targeting a top university. Right, so I guess it's almost time for us to call it a day. If you'd like us to answer a couple of questions, please post that as comments, and I'll pick up a couple of more questions before we close today's seminar, guys. All right, so Akshay says, in reference to my previous question, will a 320 in GRE be good enough? I'm not able to find your previous question, Akshay, but you can still answer, Shubhanvit.
I think, yeah, like I said, 320 is kind of, the cutoff. I mean, an informal cutoff. Again, you can make up for it, But if you get a 320, I think it's always good enough as long as you have other things also to show. So 300, and like I say, you cannot do something magical with GRE, and 320 or 325 or 330 does not matter so much. But if you have one, if it comes to down to a tiebreaker between two people, and if you have a 320 and another has a 319, and everything else is comparable, then definitely you get a heads up. So yeah, it should be good enough in my opinion. 320 is a pretty decent score.
All right. So I have a question here from Prasoon Srivastava. He says, what if someone has changed his field from engineering and then different masters? How his profile will be entertained by the university during admissions?
Well, again, you have your SOP to speak for yourself. I know people who have come from a background in engineering and then wanted to move to something like, and a degree in design. Okay, and they had things. How they got the admit is by showing their passion for design, on their in their SOP, and also they had a couple of people to vouch for them through the letters of recommendation, and that did help them. Now, yes, of course, it's going to be a little bit difficult because you are, in a sense, competing with people who have maybe spent all their, adult life doing that work. So yes, you're not, of course, going to get a preference in that, but it's also not impossible if you have. I think the key thing is that if you have something good, and more importantly, if you can show it to them that you're motivated and you can do something good, you can definitely make the switch. But don't be disheartened if you get a couple of rejections, because that's not your fault. It is just because there are people with more relevant experience who are more safer bets for the university to bring in as a student.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on that. And on that note, I think, thank you so much for sharing so much valuable information on your GRE preparation and admissions process. And I think students are kind of really pumped up and all excited to start their own MS journeys as well. So thank you so much once again for joining us, Shubhanvit, and do continue to motivate and inspire like you've always have been. Right? Do you have any final tips for fall 19 or spring 19 aspirants before we close today's session?
Yeah, there's one thing we kind of did not touch upon, I guess, that is choosing your universities. I know it's very alluring to another GRE word, to choose, a top 10 university. I mean, going to an MIT or a Stanford or a UC Berkeley, like you said, an Ivy League university. But I think one needs to be clear about what they want to do, because firstly, if you have a perfect profile, of course, you can afford any luxury. But if you do not, like for me personally, I had an 8.88 GPA, which is kind of good, but again, not that great. I was from NIT Durgapur, which is kind of a good, again, university, but there are better places, much better places. And then my GRE score was, I think it was really good. And so was my research experience compared to other peers that I had. So that's what I was heading in. And my goal was to get into a research. At that point of time, I didn't know if I wanted to do a PhD. So a research position with a master's degree. And, also I wanted to get funded. And for that, if I went ahead and applied in Ivy League schools, I'm sure I would have gotten admits, because I know people with similar profiles who have got admits. But the thing is, the problem that I would face is with funding. I don't think that with the profile I have, I would get, such funding opportunities. But now the good thing is that the United States is a rich country, and there is funding literally everywhere. And there are like big professors, even in really small universities. And one more thing that's very important is, firstly, do not go by the ranks at all, because the ranks that you see on websites like QS and US News, those are, firstly, the most of those ranks are undergraduate department ranks, and there are universities which do not, like my university. It does not, it has graduate courses, but it does not focus at all on those. I mean, it is a research based, if you guys can Google and look it up, it's something called a land grant and space grant university. So it is it's a place where intensive research happens. And there are again many universities, like Rensselaer Polytechnic is one, which it focuses even more on research. So I mean, there will be places you would find which are in their names are not as flowery as the Ivy League colleges, but they have funding and they have good professors, and if you are into those academic circles, you will see that they do a lot of great work. I mean, one of the reasons I applied in these, I chose these three universities specifically, were that there were professors who have been doing good work in these fields. Like University of Massachusetts at Amherst is a place where, I mean, on paper it's not according to undergraduate ranks, so it's not that great of a university. But then there is a lot of good, there's a lot of good research work that happens. There are a lot of eminent professors. I mean, kind of the people whose name you find on the title of a textbook. I mean, of the textbook that you have been reading. And so there are people, like great people with a lot of funding and great infrastructure hidden in these nooks and corners of United States. And so if your motivation is that you want to get funded and you want to do research, you can definitely look for these things. Also, I got to know this from the department chair of my university, that the graduate ranking basis, the basis on which they rank graduate programs across universities, is completely it's kind of qualitative. What they do is they don't have statistics. They just send out kind of a questionnaire to all the department chairs of that particular I mean across United States, and they kind of ask them to rate that particular program. Say Iowa State's electrical engineering program, what do you think? I mean, how it rates out of 5. Now the thing is, if someone knows pretty well, maybe they will give a 5. If someone doesn't know, they will give a 3. I don't know. But if you are even a smaller university, say like Kansas State, odds are that people won't know and they will just randomly put it. Whereas if you have an MIT or a Stanford, everyone is going to, just because of the brand value. Now I'm not saying that that the brand value does not count. I mean, MIT is MIT and Stanford is Stanford. If you get into any of those, by all means, if you get funded, you should go there. But if you are looking for a career in research, then I think it's and you think that you don't have a perfect profile, like I think I did not, it is always better to look at other universities, and especially public universities, which are, I mean, the state universities. They tend to have a lot of funding from places like NSF, which is the National Science Foundation of United States, or and there is this National Endowment for Arts, for liberal arts and humanities, and also other places like NASA and USDA, and I mean a lot of other places also which fund these universities. And one more thing that I would say is that, but if you are solely looking for a job, then go to a university which is either in the East Coast or the West, because if you are in California or in New York or in Massachusetts, it will help a lot to get a job.
Wonderful. I think that gives me a very, very clear picture, and I'm sure it's the same for the audience. Thank you so much for shedding light on one of the most important aspects of the admissions process, which is selecting the right universities for your profile. So I believe we've covered all of the important aspects of your MS journey, and most of the audience here also are extremely happy with the kind of inputs that they've received. So thank you so much once again for sharing all of these valuable insights, and also taking the time to spend with us and discuss your journey with us. Right. So on that note, I also like to ask the audience to leave your feedback. Let us know how you found today's seminar, and we'd love to hear from you and understand what is it that you'd like us to work on. And if there's any topic that you want us to cover, let us know that as well. Right. So on that note, I'm just going to conclude that this has been a wonderful session. Thank you so much. You've been a very, very patient audience. We've been speaking for about, say, 1.5 hours, close to 2 hours, and you still haven't lost your energy. So I'm really, really excited, and I hope to see you all in our upcoming seminars. Thank you so much, Shubhanvit, for all of your valuable information and your time. So until next time, this is Donna David and Shubhanvit signing off. A very good evening and all the very best for your MS journey. Take care.